What if your last night alive began with something as innocent as a poker game? In 2010, a bright 21-year-old business student's path crossed with a man already notorious worldwide. A man who just 5 years earlier had been the prime suspect in another young woman's disappearance. The security cameras at the Atlantic City Casino in Lima, Peru captured them, leaving together at 5:35 a.m. 3 days later, her body was found in his hotel room. This is the story of Stephany Flores, the case that finally brought Joran van der Sloot to justice. If you watched our previous episode on Natalee Holloway, you already know the name Joran van der Sloot, the Dutch man who became the prime suspect in her 2005 disappearance in Aruba, yet walked free due to insufficient evidence. Today, exactly 5 years after Natalee vanished, another young woman's life would be cut short, and this time there would be nowhere for her killer to hide. This content is created to inform and raise awareness about personal safety, not to glorify or sensationalize tragedy. Lima, Peru, a vibrant coastal capital where ancient history meets modern energy. A city of contrasts, where colonial architecture stands in the shadow of sleek skyscrapers, and where, in May 2010, 21-year-old Stephany Flores was building her future. Stephany wasn't just any college student, the daughter of businessman and former race car driver Ricardo Flores. She was studying business administration and had already shown an entrepreneurial spirit. Intelligent, vivacious, and independent, friends described her as someone who lit up rooms with her presence. She had a passion for poker, a game of strategy and psychology that she played at local casinos. Meanwhile, thousands of miles from his home in the Netherlands, 22-year-old Joran van der Sloot was drifting through Latin America. Still shadowed by suspicion from the Holloway case, he had apparently come to Peru for a poker tournament. Whether running from his past or simply seeking new horizons, van der Sloot's presence in Lima would prove fatal for a young woman who had the misfortune of crossing his path. The beginning of her end. On the 30th of May 2010, exactly 5 years to the day since Natalee Holloway disappeared in Aruba, the Atlantic City Casino in Lima's affluent Miraflores district was bustling with activity. Among the players was Stephany Flores, who often enjoyed testing her poker skills. Also at the tables that night was Joran van der Sloot. Security camera footage later revealed the timeline of that night. Stephany and van der Sloot playing at the same poker table, the two talking, and then at 5:35 a.m. on May 30th, the cameras captured them leaving together in her car, heading toward the Hotel Tag, where van der Sloot was staying. More security footage showed them entering his hotel room at approximately 5:40 a.m. At 8:10 a.m., van der Sloot left alone. Stephany Flores would never leave that room alive. Body of evidence. When Stephany failed to return home, her family immediately reported her missing. Her father, Ricardo Flores, mobilized everything at his disposal to find his daughter. A search that would end in heartbreak. On June 2nd, 3 days after she was last seen, Stephany's body was discovered in room 309 of the Hotel Tag. The room registered to Joran van der Sloot. She had suffered significant trauma, and the room showed signs of a violent struggle. Her neck was broken, and she had been beaten severely. By this time, van der Sloot had already fled Peru, crossing into Chile by bus. The evidence against him was overwhelming. Security footage, witness testimony, and the crime scene itself told a damning story. Peruvian authorities moved quickly, working with Interpol to issue an international arrest warrant. On June 3rd, just 5 days after Stephany's murder, Chilean police apprehended van der Sloot. in a taxi headed for Viña del Mar. He was traveling alone with a backpack and a suitcase. The confession. After his extradition to Peru, van der Sloot initially claimed that intruders had broken into his room and attacked Stephany while he was out getting coffee. But faced with mounting evidence, he changed his story. In a confession he would later attempt to retract, van der Sloot told authorities that he had become enraged when he found Stephany looking at his laptop, specifically at information relating to the Natalee Holloway case. According to his statement, he snapped, striking her and ultimately killing her. Whether this was truly what happened or simply a narrative crafted to suggest a crime of passion rather than premeditation remains debated. What was clear, however, was that Stephany Flores had encountered a dangerous man with a dark past and paid the ultimate price. Justice for Stephany. The trial of Joran van der Sloot began in January 2012 in Lima. In a stunning move, he pleaded guilty to the qualified murder and simple robbery of Stephany Flores, though he claimed the killing wasn't premeditated. On January 13th, 2012, the three-judge panel sentenced van der Sloot to 28 years in prison, the second highest sentence possible under Peruvian law at that time. Additionally, he was ordered to pay approximately $75,000 in reparations to the Flores family. For many who had followed the Holloway case years earlier, there was a sense that justice had finally caught up with van der Sloot. For the Flores family, however, no sentence could bring back their beloved Stephany. The international connection, the timing of Stephany's murder, exactly 5 years after Natalee Holloway's disappearance, struck many as no coincidence. In fact, around the same time as the murder, van der Sloot had been attempting to extort money from Natalee's mother, Beth Holloway. He had offered to reveal the location of Natalee's remains in exchange for $250,000, receiving an initial payment of $25,000. This money, investigators later determined, had funded his trip to Peru. The FBI, which had been operating a sting operation around this extortion attempt, later charged van der Sloot with extortion and wire fraud. These charges would eventually lead to his extradition to the United States in 2023, after serving a significant portion of his sentence in Peru. A father's anguish. Amid the international intrigue and the connection to a previous high-profile case, it's important to remember that at the center of this tragedy was Stephany Flores, a young woman with dreams, ambitions, and a family who loved her deeply. Her father, Ricardo Flores, has been outspoken about the need to remember his daughter for how she lived, not just how she died. "My daughter was a girl who was very cheerful, very hard-working, and she had a lot to live for," he said after the trial. In Peru, Stephany's case brought renewed attention to issues of violence against women and personal safety. Her story serves as a sobering reminder of how quickly a normal evening can turn deadly when paths cross with dangerous individuals. The psychological dimension. What drives someone to take an innocent life? While we must be careful not to oversimplify or excuse such behaviors, experts who have analyzed van der Sloot's patterns suggest a profile consistent with psychopathic traits: charm, manipulation, lack of empathy, and impulsivity. Dr. Catherine Ramsland, a forensic psychologist who has written extensively on predatory behavior, notes that individuals with these traits often escalate their behavior over time when they evade consequences. When someone commits a violent act and escapes serious repercussions, she explains, it can reinforce their sense of invulnerability and potentially embolden them toward further violence. The 5 years between Natalee's disappearance and Stephany's murder represent a critical period where intervention might have made a difference. A sobering thought for justice systems worldwide. Lessons and legacy. Every tragedy carries with it potential lessons, though they come at an unbearable cost. Stephany's case reminds us of several harsh realities. 1. Predatory individuals often don't stop with one victim. 2. International boundaries can complicate justice. 3. Personal safety awareness remains critically important, especially in unfamiliar settings. 4. Justice systems must work together across borders to prevent dangerous individuals from finding new hunting grounds. Perhaps most importantly, Stephany's case reminds us to see victims of violent crime as full human beings, people with lives, dreams, and futures that were stolen from them. The story of Stephany Flores and Joran van der Sloot interconnects with Natalee Holloway's disappearance in ways that highlight how justice delayed can lead to further tragedy. Yet it also shows that eventually, actions have consequences. In 2023, after serving more than a decade in Peruvian prison for Stephany's murder, van der Sloot was temporarily extradited to the United States, where he finally confessed to killing Natalee Holloway and revealed the location of her remains. He was sentenced to 20 years for extortion, to be served concurrently with his Peruvian sentence. For the families of both young women, these confessions brought long-awaited answers, though they do little to fill the void left behind. As Martin Luther King Jr. once wrote, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." The stories of Stephany Flores and Natalee Holloway are not just true crime narratives. They are profound human tragedies that reflect our vulnerabilities, our pursuit of justice, and ultimately, our capacity to remember and honor those we've lost. Until next time, stay safe.